There's a lot of things that's interesting about this film. It's just such a it like fills me with so much like love and just like if that San Francisco that we all miss right now is just fully captured in your film. But it's a film about one of the most iconic artists of our time, about his most maybe ambitious and iconic projects. And what's interesting is there's so many layers, right? Each the stories are is the project itself, this massive tapestry that is the mural, this moving mural, and the ambition behind that, and the kind of heart behind that. There's each individual story, but on top of that, the last layer that we saw right there was your film. So like, how do you personally add your own like kind of filmic, so to speak, layer and story within all these kind of interwoven stories, if that makes sense?
That's a great question. I feel like I remember we were talking a little earlier today about that theme of collage with JR's work and with the layers. And I feel like, I do different types of filmmaking, but primarily as a documentarian, so much of it is about gathering these pieces and then collaging them together as well. And so I think, in approaching this piece, I really wanted to create a piece that shows that behind the scenes process, but also really just immersing people in these little moments that made the process so special. Because I mean, the final piece is so incredible, but so much that made this project so special was all of those moments of interactions to create that final piece. So yeah, I just really wanted to be able to drop people into these little moments and experience how incredible it was that every day for 30 days, this truck went around the city to different locations. And each time it had all of these same structures of there was a truck and people would come in and go onto the green screen and then have their interview done. But every moment was so different because when each person came into the truck, they brought so many different stories and experiences. So I just wanted to really just highlight how even with this repetition of the process, every single person was so unique and brought something new to the project. So
You did exactly that, and San Francisco gave you like all like the I don't want to use an ammo reference, but like all the ammunition you could like handle with that. So the variance of personalities and characters and all that was just so beautifully kind of woven together. Yeah.
oh, thanks, Brenton. Well, I'm excited to talk about your film because it really is one of my favorite short films, and I love your work as a filmmaker so much. And I feel
Thanks,
like
Tasha.
you bring such a special and intimate touch to all of your projects. And I mean, with this film, I have so many questions, but um, I think to start, I think the visual aesthetic is so strong in this piece, and I'd love to hear more about your process as the director and how you approach the style, the aspect ratio, choosing to go into black and white, and just more about your approach to the aesthetic on this piece.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. And I first got to give a shout out to my good friend and DP on this project, Tony Mack, who did a great job shooting it. I think, I don't know, we talked earlier a little bit about like imposing style on a documentary, on documentary subject matter, and how that's like a kind of a potential slippery slope. And I think in some ways I kind of regret like like some of the style that I imposed. Like I imposed my own will on some of that story, but at the same time, like I mean, I think what I wanted to do, and the reason for the 4:3 aspect ratio, which of course is like super like so to in vogue, so to speak, right now, or was a year ago, in the black and white. The main decisions for that is to essentially sit with people in the most intimate way possible. I think 4:3 allows this kind of aspect ratio for a close up that creates this level of intimacy, the verticality of it, and the cutting of the either side of the frame. You're just sitting with a person, and if you're in that memorial and you see all the faces, you see the landscape of those faces, you see stories behind every little wrinkle, the tube in the guy's nose, and all that kind of stuff. I wanted to accentuate that. That was a big thing. And yeah, I always saw, I mean, I guess the whole, as you could see, there's a 26-second, I guess it's not a shot because we're cutting back and forth between two cameras, but collar shot slash scene slash whatever. So I always saw like the black shirt and the white collar, and I was already friends with Paul, and I knew his approach to these memorials. I know he's been doing them for years, and I know I've been with him in preparation for that. And everything felt a little different while being with him during that time. It felt a little bit devoid of, you know, living living vibrant spirit that usually kind of exists in Paul's world that I know of. So therefore, I think the visual thing that I clinged onto was the white collar and the black shirt, and just the subject matter itself made me want to kind of like reduce everything into this black and white image.
That's incredible. I mean, that really comes through with the piece, and I love the intimacy that, you know, is evoked through that 4:3 aspect ratio, and also just, you know, the way with the black and white to really focus on each person in that setting, and it's so beautifully shot by Tony as well. So that's great.
Yeah, great work, Tony. I know you're here. Cool. Thanks, Tasha. Okay, so I got a more of a craft oriented question, and I think you and I could both relate to this question. And so I'm trying to get like kind of tips from you a little bit. But one thing that I like, what's incredible about you is that, okay, you told me earlier, I had this whole question for you about like, all right, what's your crew look like? Like you're a cinematographer and you're a director. So therefore, you know, are you shooting this? Like who's doing what for you, right? Are you running sound? And then I learned you did everything. Everything. The credits you could see was pretty short. So my question is, because you direct commercials, you're working on your own feature film right now, you know, and you shoot, you direct, you do all these things. What's like, what's the process for you in terms of like you work on projects that span such like this like kind of the spectrum, right? Like big crew things on sets to just picking up your camera and going. Like, how do you navigate that kind of vast difference in your work from a process standpoint?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I feel like every project is so different, and you know, I love doing shoots where it's this one person band approach, just because it's so intimate and I can really just navigate through the scenario and kind of have that fly on the wall approach to it. So that's always great. But at the same time, you know, depending on the story, like you said, I work with really big crews for different projects. So, I mean, with this project, the way it came about, a lot of the reason that it was just me filming for the most part was out of necessity. I actually was one of the first participants in the mural, and it was the first project that I did with JR. So I think I was the third or fourth person, and just saw the truck and came in on the street and saw JR inside and noticed no one was documenting the process behind it. And I thought,
and did you know him before? Did you know of him before?
I knew of him before. Yeah,
okay.
Actually followed his work for many years, and back in college designed my own major in it, on this theme of art for social justice, and actually his work really inspired that. So it was very serendipitous. But we never met before, and but I was so interested in this process of just seeing this truck that's moving throughout the city, and you go inside and they have this green screen set up, and it was just so interesting to me. So I pretty much just came back the next day with my camera and started documenting. And because it's such a small space and there's so many people coming in and off the street, I really just kind of had to do all the pieces myself. But yeah, but then in the edit, I worked with an amazing editor, Dana Lehman, where we really took all of this footage and pieces and started to craft the story together.
Very cool. Yeah, and I think, and one thing we commented on, or I commented on backstage, so to speak, was I love that shot of the horse kind of cutting across the frame in the foreground. And then Dana did a great job. I love how she just basically, that's like kind of an invisible type of cut to straight to that kind of close up of the horse on stage. Like you did a great job, like having, and we've worked together, you know, before, so I know how you shoot and all that, but like you just like cover so much ground. And I think you're like an editor's best friend too, in terms of like how much ground you could cover. You give options, which like that's why it made that whole piece felt like it was shot by like 2-3 cameras. But yeah, so pretty amazing.
And worst nightmare with how much footage I had at the end of it.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. I mean, I have so many questions for you about your film, but I would love to hear more about how you first became connected with Paul and about your work in the Tenderloin and how you just started developing the process and story for this film.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so I started like my storytelling journey, I guess like 5 years ago now as a photographer, and I ended up um, starting mainly as like kind of a street photographer on the streets of the TL. I used to work, or not work, but I used to be on like this board of a nonprofit in the TL, and I have other kind of like history there, like family history, and more kind of nefarious side of the TL. So there's like these weird intersections that happen, and I just so happened by working with my friend or learning how to do photography with my friend Felix, that we kind of entered into the Tenderloin and started telling stories there. So I started a project called Tender Souls, which was a photo documentary kind of project with some audio components. I then made my first documentary, I guess 3 years ago now. Yeah, actually a little less than 3 years ago. And that was called Tender Souls as well. And it was just this short doc about three different people in the Tenderloin. So I spent 2.5 years of my like professional life, like on the streets as a photographer and as a filmmaker. And that's just kind of, I don't know exactly all the things that made it happen, but I just felt really at home there. I felt like love there. And I felt, yeah, I felt kind of weirdly understood. I know it sounds kind of weird, but like, but it became kind of second home to me. So I also got a chance to work with a lot of organizations that were like some of my first clients, and City Hope was one of them. And Paul, as you can see, he's a pastor, but he's an executive director, like co-executive director at City Hope, which is a nonprofit that supports hundreds and thousands of people in the Tenderloin. But he's like this artist. He always says he's this artist that wasn't brave enough to be a professional artist because the insecurity of it all. So I mean, you guys know what we're talking about, right? But anyways, so we've done a lot of storytelling projects with him, and I knew he did these memorials, and he would tell me about them, and we just thought one day, it was like, wouldn't it be amazing if we got to memorialize somebody through a permanent story, um, through watching your work and seeing how the memorial unfolded. So that was something that we wanted to do for a few years, and we kind of just put on the back burner. But I basically went around to all the different housing associations in the Tenderloin and like knocked on the doors and said, hey, this is what we want to do. But it was really complex because there's like HIPAA compliance, there's Department of Public Health, there's all these like hoops you got to jump through. But luckily, and I'll get to my main answer but like luckily Tender Souls having that film, the Tenderloin really like enjoyed that film, which was really cool. From people on the streets to people at nonprofits and stuff. And so CHP, which is a community housing partnership there, gave us the yes. And it was just a matter of time before, I mean, sadly to say, somebody would pass and they would open up their doors to celebrate that person. So that's kind of how it unfolded. We're up.
Hey
It's up
guys,
already.
we're almost out of time, and we are a little bit after 9 at this point. So I just
Okay.
wanted to say to everyone, thank you so much for being here. We're wrapping it up. We do just have one. We'll take one question from the audience. You know, while we're here, Josh had asked Brenton if you guys shot the ceremony with multiple cameras, and what was it like being in the room?
Yeah, we shot all like the initial like kind of sequence, both or the initial scene in his office and then on the street with one camera. And Tony operated. And then I think we shot the inside interior stuff at the memorial with 3 cameras. So like we had an A camera that was on the podium, and then we had a B camera on the cellist that we would kind of move with her a little bit, and then we had a roving kind of C camera, which was picking up all those singles in camera. And Tony and I both operated that camera. We would like kind of change off, and we had a rhythm to that, which is great. And being in that room, it was kind of beautiful. It was a really warm room. It was these people had a lot of love in their hearts that they were really ready to share and wanted to share. And they were so welcoming to us. And although like film crews could be, um, you know, could put some people off, they saw it as something that was kind of a celebration of Jason, of their neighbor. And man, like the tenderloin where, like, you know, cats at the stat, but where mortality is like just in the fragility of life is just right there for everybody to see. People are so there; they're willing to kind of share and celebrate and celebrate the goodness of their neighbors, and that was just so apparent. So there wasn't a ton of sadness. There was a lot of joy.
It's really great that you could capture it and that you could share it with all of us as well. We are at the end of our Q&A and, you know, at the end of all of our films, but I just want to thank you, Tasha, so much for being here. I loved hearing what you had to say about your film, and all of our viewers could see that while you were talking, I privately texted Brendan, our tech, and I was like, art for social justice, that's so cool. Like, I love that that was your major in college. So I'm going to have to stop your video now, but Tasha, thank you so much. It was great having you here.
Thank you so much. This was so great. Thank you.
Bye, Tasha.
Bye.